The secret Nazi witchcraft project. In 1935, Reichsführer-SS Heinrich Himmler set up a secret project using a small team of 17 undercover SS agents disguised as students and sent them all over Germany and other countries. These Nazi secret agents carried fake IDs and worked under false names. But what was their mission? Was it to gather intelligence on enemies spying inside the Reich? No, it was not. What was it then? Well, funnily enough, it was to sneak into libraries to research witches. The aim of this project was not just some random research into the occult. In a nutshell, the Sonderauftrag H, or Special Assignment H Unit, H for Hexen, German for witches, was actually to gather data on all known witchcraft trials and executions going back centuries. And so this secret unit over the following years combed hundreds of archives and libraries and managed to create a huge database of books and around 33,000 index cards on the subject of witchcraft. Nazi fascination in the occult. It's widely known that Heinrich Himmler and other Nazis were fascinated with the occult. The Thule Society, a secret organisation interested in both the occult and racial theory and set up following World War I, was full of early Nazi sympathisers. Later, Alfred Rosenberg, the Nazi Party's notorious prophet and author of The Myth of the 20th Century, published in 1930, would incorporate some of the teachings in his works. Elements of this interest in the occult later crept into the culture and rituals of the Schutzstaffel. Race. The Nazi obsession with race also played a part in Unit H's formation, however, including, to use Himmler's words, Germany's so-called eternal foes, the Jews. So then, if we look through Himmler's warped lens of history, the Jews were responsible for the murder of thousands of German women through witchcraft trials. His desire to prove this scientifically was the raison d'être for Special Assignment H. There was nothing original about Himmler's views here. They stemmed from the rabid thinking of Rosenberg and the Thule Society. Rosenberg saw the German witch craze from a false racial perspective, riding roughshod over established history, accusing the Jews of witch hunting, stating that they had perpetrated a genocide against German womanhood. Himmler thus set about trying to prove Rosenberg's fake thesis, setting up Unit H to analyse the political, social and economic causes and consequences of the witch trials. Nazi religion and the so-called Jewish conspiracy. Himmler's obsession with witches was also part of a yearning to create his own brand of Nazi-style religion. He was a huge fan of displays, preferably torchlit, involving bonfires, drums and lots of Nazi saluting. Witches were a key part of this delusional vision. They were, after all, a staple of German fairy tales, ergo the Brothers Grimm. Himmler's take on his master's thesis was that the typical German witch of history was actually a sort of shamanic seeress, persecuted by the Catholic Church. Of course, ever the Nazi fantasist, he maintained that the force behind this genocide was not in fact the Church, but actually an international Jewish cabal. Thus, the H Project was also a way of justifying Jewish persecution and eventual genocide by the Nazis. Hansel and Gretel. For example, the witch in the Hansel and Gretel story by the Brothers Grimm would have been a good Germanic seeress, according to Himmler. Obviously, this view was contrary to German folklore and fairy tale tradition. Himmler made reference to his views in a speech to a Nazi farming organisation in 1935, quote, "We see how the funeral pyres blazed, on which the battered and torn bodies of our mothers and girls, of our people, burned to ashes in the witch trials." Of course, the Jews were not in any way connected to the Hexenwahn, or witch mania that swept across the German states in the Middle Ages. Not just Catholics, but Protestants being responsible in part too, with Martin Luther himself notoriously calling for the killing of sorceresses in his address to the congregation of Wittenberg in 1526. However, Himmler did not care for historical facts. He only sought to warp history to fit his own narrative. Originally, the Nazi witch project was to gather information on witch trials in Germany. However, over time they wandered all over, throughout Europe and even as far away as Mexico and India. Unit H acquired around 140,000 books and written materials on witches and witchcraft, witch trials and anything associated with the subject, including fairy tales and information on locations. Supernatural powers. It also seems that Himmler and his cronies really believed that medieval witches were in possession of supernatural powers, and that these must have been passed down to the present time genetically. Himmler himself was convinced he was related to a powerful witch from the Middle Ages, thus may well have believed that he had some kind of latent magical abilities. Hitler's view. But what did the great megalomaniac himself think of all this? Well, it seems that Hitler wasn't too impressed. Not a fan of Christianity or religion in general, he expressed his views on the subject to Albert Speer, who stated in his memoirs in 1969 that, quote, "What nonsense! Here we have at last reached an age that has left all the mysticism behind it, and now he wants to start that all over again. We might just as well have stayed with the church. At least it had tradition." The end. Notwithstanding Hitler's objections, Himmler proceeded with his Special Assignment H Unit and its pseudo-scientific research activities. The project only completely terminating towards the end of the war when, in 1945, the Red Army swept through Germany and seized the castle of Slava in Lower Silesia. This castle happened to be a central base of operations for the SS and a repository for the tens of thousands of books and index cards of Unit H. No doubt the Red Army must have believed they'd hit the jackpot in terms of intelligence, only to discover that their trove, once translated, was all about witches and the occult. That's all for now. Thanks for watching this short documentary. If you appreciated it, please like, comment and subscribe. See you next time.